The war that consumed the galaxy. There is a moment before the end of all civilization, when the universe becomes silent, not because the war is over, but because there was no one left to shout. Planets burned in the void of space like forgotten embers. Entire fleets vanished without a trace. Solar systems that once harbored billions of lives were now just ruins floating in the infinite darkness. And worst of all, no one remembered anymore how that war really started. For decades, humanity lived believing in a single truth: the Ethel were the enemies. From childhood, humans learned to fear that mysterious alien race. Stories about destroyed worlds, soldiers disappearing through time, and entire cities erased from existence were told as warnings. The Ethel were not seen merely as aliens. They were seen as monsters. They claimed they could predict attacks before they even happened. They could see the future. Some rumors claimed something even worse, that they were able to alter time itself. That's why the war started, or at least, that's what everyone believed. Humanity had expanded rapidly across the stars. In less than 2 centuries, human colonies occupied dozens of solar systems. New cities sprang up on distant planets, merchant fleets crisscrossed the galaxy daily. And for the first time, humans believed they would finally dominate the universe. But then the first signs appeared. Spaceships began disappearing. Near the boundaries of space, military bases lost contact without explanation. Entire planets became completely empty. Overnight. No bodies. No wreckage. No survivors. Just silence. And whenever this happened, strange symbols were found in the affected regions. Ethel symbols. Fear spread rapidly. Human governments panicked. Entire systems began to militarize. Scientists tried to understand who these creatures were, but almost no one had ever seen an Ethel up close and survived to tell the tale. They were like ghosts. They appeared without warning. They attacked, and they disappeared. Again, that's how the war started. A war so brutal that it slowly destroyed the entire galaxy. Humans created gigantic armies. The Ethel responded with impossible technologies. Planets were being bombarded, moons were being destroyed, and the space became an endless graveyard of metal and fire. But as the years went by, something began to change. The human soldiers noticed something strange during the battles. The Ethel never attacked to conquer territories. They never occupied planets. They never enslaved populations. They would simply appear, destroy specific targets, and disappear. As if they were trying to stop something. But nobody asked questions during wartime. Hatred had already consumed everything. Millions of people wanted revenge. Entire families had been destroyed. Civilizations were falling. And every time a new tragedy occurred, the Ethel name was held responsible. Then a man appeared, Commander Elias Kane, one of the greatest soldiers in the Earth fleet, a man who lost everything to the war. His wife died during an attack on Orion-7. Your brother disappeared on a mission near the Ethiopia border, and from that day on, Elias swore to destroy that race until the last survivor was gone. He became a legend among humans. Cold. Ruthless. Perfect in combat. But what Elijah didn't know yet, the truth was that his entire life had been built on a lie, because somewhere beyond the known regions of the galaxy, something far worse watched the war grow. Something old. Silent. Waiting for the right moment to appear. And when it finally appeared, humans and Ethel would realize too late that they were never the true enemies. Some men go down in history because of their courage, others out of cruelty. But Elias Kane became a legend because he survived. In a galaxy where millions of soldiers died every day, survival was already nearly impossible. Experienced captains vanished in seconds during space battles. Entire fleets were reduced to rubble before they could even react. But Elijah always returned. Injured. Tired. Marked by war. That's why the soldiers started calling him the Iron Ghost. They said that death simply couldn't reach him. At that moment, Elias observed space through the enormous window of the Vokrion's command bridge. His eyes silently followed the wreckage of dozens of destroyed ships floating around the planet Nox. Is another battle, more deaths, more names that would be forgotten until the next war. The red light of the alarms was constantly flashing inside the spacecraft. Shields at 34%, Commander, shouted an officer. Elias did not respond. Immediately, he continued staring into the dark void of space. He had already participated in so many battles that the alarms ceased to mean anything. A long time ago. Fear too. Perhaps that was the worst consequence of the war. She didn't just destroy planets, she destroyed people from the inside out. Elias breathed slowly. The reflection in the glass showed a man completely different from the one who once believed in hope. The military uniform concealed scars scattered across his entire body. His dark hair was beginning to turn gray, and his eyes held a weariness that no night's sleep could erase. Years ago, Elias was different. Before the war consumed everything. Before the pain, before the losses. He still remembered the last time he saw his wife alive. The planet Orion 7 was under attack that day. Sirens blared through the streets as thousands of people tried to flee the bombings. Elias was far away, fighting on another space frontier, unable to return, unable to protect her. When he finally managed to return, he found only ruins. No survivors. No body. Nothing. Only silence. And Ethel symbols scattered across the city's ruined walls. That day something died inside him. After that, Elijah threw himself completely into the war. He stopped living. He stopped feeling. All that remained now was hatred, a cold, silent hatred that grew with each battle. Then came the disappearance of his younger brother, Marcus. Their ship vanished near the forbidden borders of the galaxy. The last transmission sent contained only static, and a single desperate sentence. "They are not what we thought." After that, the signal disappeared forever. Elias tried to find out what had happened, but the military files were deleted. The authorities closed the case. No one ever spoke of Marcus Kane again. That destroyed what little humanity remained in him. Now, years later, Elias had become exactly what the war needed, a weapon. On the Vokrion's bridge, the officers awaited orders in absolute silence. They all respected Elias, but they were also afraid of him because the commander never hesitated. He never showed emotions. He never backed down, even when the situation seemed impossible. Another explosion shook the spacecraft violently. The lights flickered for a few seconds. "Enemy fleet advancing through the eastern sector," announced a soldier. Holograms glowed across the room, showing hundreds of spaceships engaged in combat around the planet. Chaos reigned supreme. Even so, Elias remained motionless. Cold. Calculating each move. That's when something strange appeared on the main radar. A small, unknown signal crossed the battlefield, alone. No identification. Without weapons, moving slowly between the explosions. One of the operators frowned. "Commander, we have an unidentified object approaching the spacecraft." Elias finally looked away from the window. For some reason, a strange feeling ran through his body. As if that tiny capsule, in the midst of the chaos of battle, something impossible emerged. While hundreds of ships exploded over the planet Noxus, a small object slowly traversed the battlefield. It didn't dodge the gunfire. It didn't try to escape the explosions. It simply continued in a straight line, as if it knew exactly where it needed to go. On the Vokrion's bridge, the operators began exchanging confused glances. "Identify that signal immediately," Elias ordered. The holograms changed rapidly. The object appeared, enlarged on the main screen. It was a small capsule. Old. Almost destroyed. But there was something strange about her. No defense system. No military signature. No visible engine. That didn't make sense. Origin unknown. murmured an officer as she analyzed the data. "It doesn't belong to any registered fleet." Another explosion shook the spacecraft. Red lights flashed all over the bridge, but at that moment, nobody was paying attention to the battle anymore, because the capsule kept heading straight towards Val Kryon, without fear, without hesitation, as if he were searching for Elijah. The commander narrowed his eyes. "It could be a trap. Should we destroy it?" a soldier asked. Elias remained silent for a few seconds. Something inside him told him that this was different. Too strange to be just an enemy bomb. "No," he finally replied. "Bring the capsule to the main hangar." The officers exchanged surprised glances. "Sir, this is extremely risky. I know." Outside the spacecraft, robotic arms began to move slowly as the small capsule approached, amidst the debris floating in space. Around her, the war continued. The ships were burning. Bodies were thrown into the void. Gunshots cut through the darkness like crimson lightning. But that capsule remained intact. As if chaos itself were paving the way for its passage. Minutes later, Valkyrion's enormous hangar was cordoned off. Dozens of armed soldiers surrounded the place. Gunmen positioned themselves on the upper floors. Combat robots aimed heavy weapons directly at the metal capsule stationary in the center of the hangar. The silence was suffocating. Nobody knew what to expect. An explosive? An alien assassin? Some kind of biological weapon? Elias slowly entered the hangar, accompanied by elite officers. His footsteps echoed through the enormous metallic space as smoke and porty sparks billowed from the damaged capsule. She looked old. Very old. It's as if I've been traveling through space for years, perhaps decades. One of the soldiers swallowed hard. "Sir, we detected vital signs inside." Everyone raised their weapons. Immediately, tensions rose. Then the capsule began to open. The metallic sound echoed slowly through the hangar. The interior lights flickered, and for a few seconds, nobody breathed, until they finally saw what was inside. A child, a small girl, huddled at the bottom of the capsule. She seemed frightened. Weak. His body was covered in strange markings, glistening faintly beneath his skin. But it was his eyes that made the soldiers' blood run cold. Completely silver eyes. A deathly silence fell over the hangar. Until one of the soldiers took a step back in shock. "No, that's not possible." Another raised his weapon, trembling. "She is an Ethel." The atmosphere immediately exploded with tension. The soldiers started shouting orders. Weapons were locked. Some instinctively retreated. Because everyone knew the stories. Ethel were creatures feared throughout the galaxy. Beings capable of manipulating time. Monsters responsible for the destruction of entire worlds. And now, a child of that race was inside the most important ship in the Earth fleet. Alone. The girl slowly raised her gaze. She seemed lost. Confused. Almost human. Then their eyes met Elijah, and at that moment, something strange happened. The commander felt a shiver run through his entire body. As if that child recognized him. As if he had known him for a long time. Then she spoke. In a low, weak, almost desperate voice. "You need to run away." The soldiers stood motionless. Elias stepped forward. "Run away from whom?" The girl began to tremble. Tears slowly streamed down her face, and when she answered, her voice was filled with pure terror. "They found you." The entire hangar remained silent. Nobody moved. Nobody was breathing. Only the distant sound of explosions outside the spacecraft echoed through the metallic environment as everyone stared at the small child sitting inside the capsule. An AETHL. But inside Valkyrien, the soldiers gripped their weapons so tightly that some trembled. Many of them had grown up hearing stories about that race, stories told in military schools, war broadcasts, and government campaigns. The Ethel felt no compassion. They felt no fear. They felt no guilt. That's what everyone believed. Therefore, seeing that girl crying, seemed wrong, almost impossible. One of the officers quickly approached Elias. Sir, we need to eliminate it now. She may be manipulating all of us. It could be some kind of time trap. Other soldiers agreed. Immediately, fear was growing rapidly inside the hangar. Because no one understood what an Ethel was truly capable of. Some said they could get inside people's minds. Others believed they could see seconds into the future during combat. But there were even worse rumors. Rumors are forbidden. Stories about Ethel capable of erasing people from existence. As if they had never been born. Elias watched the girl without saying anything. She seemed too weak to pose any threat. His body was trembling, his breathing was irregular, and his eyes showed no malice. They showed fear. Very scared, the child clutched a small metal object to his chest, as if it were something extremely important. Elias realized that immediately. What is she holding? Before anyone could respond, 2 soldiers stepped forward to grab the object. But the moment they got close, the hangar lights flickered violently. All systems failed for a second. The soldiers were thrown back without the girl even touching them. The impact was so strong that they both slammed against the metal wall. The guns fired. Accidentally, shouts echoed through the hangar. Immediately, dozens of rifles were pointed at the child. Don't move. Shoot her if she does anything. The girl started crying even more. I didn't want to do this. Her voice sounded desperate. As if she herself were afraid of what was happening. Elias slowly raised his hand to signal the soldiers to lower their weapons. Let's wait. Sir, she just attacked our men. No, Elias replied, staring intently at her. She defended herself. The officer was incredulous. She is an Ethel. These creatures have killed millions of people. Elias did not respond immediately, because something about that situation seemed wrong. Very wrong. If that girl really was an enemy weapon, why would I be alone? Why did she seem so scared? And most importantly, why did it seem like it was running away from something? The child slowly raised his eyes to Elijah again. His gaze now held pure despair. They are coming. Then the walls of the spacecraft began to shake. A gigantic explosion echoed through the corridors of Vokrion. The alarms went crazy. The red lights began flashing frantically. On the bridge, desperate voices came through the intercoms. Commander Kane, we have a problem. Multiple unknown signatures have appeared around the fleet. We can't identify them. The soldiers in the hangar exchanged nervous glances. Elias immediately activated the holographic panel attached to his arm. So you saw hundreds of enormous red dots appearing in the space surrounding Vokrion. Unknown spacecraft. Gigantic. Silent. Emerging. From nowhere, Elijah's blood ran cold, because throughout his entire military career, he had never seen technology capable of doing that. The girl slowly closed her eyes, like someone who already knew exactly what was going to happen. Then he whispered, "They found us." The space around the human fleet has changed. It wasn't just the arrival of the new spacecraft. It was as if the universe itself had gone wrong. On the Vokrion's bridge, the holograms began to malfunction violently. Interference covered the radars. Metallic sounds echoed through the corridors as entire systems ceased to respond. The operators were trying to understand what was happening, but no one could explain it, because those spaceships simply shouldn't exist. Confirmed quantity? Elias asked as he walked quickly through the ship's corridors. The officer's voice trembled on the communicator. Still counting. But there are hundreds. Origin? Silence. A few seconds later she replied, "Unknown." Elias frowned immediately. That was impossible. Humanity possessed records of virtually every known civilization in the galaxy. Even uncatalogued races left identifiable energy signatures. But those spaceships, they didn't correspond to anything. When Elias returned to the command bridge, he found the soldiers completely paralyzed in front of the main screens. Then he saw, and for a moment, even he lost his breath. Enormous black structures floated in the void of space. Gigantic. Much larger than any human cruiser. Their hooves seemed to absorb the surrounding light, making it difficult to even see their full outlines. There were no windows. There were no symbols. There were no visible engines. It was like looking at creatures made of pure darkness. And the worst part? They were completely still, just observing. Silence fell over the bridge. Even the most seasoned veterans seemed unable to speak, because there was something profoundly wrong with those spaceships, something that triggered instant fear. One of the soldiers whispered almost without realizing it, "It seems they are alive." No one answered, because everyone felt exactly the same way. Then the system started to die. First the radars. Then the shields. The guns shut off. One after the other. Lights flashed violently all over Vokrion. Total loss of defensive systems. Shouted an operator. Engines collapsing. External communication is failing. Chaos erupted on the bridge. Soldiers ran desperately trying to restart the systems, while deafening alarms echoed throughout the ship. But nothing worked. It was as if some invisible force was shutting down the technology of the entire fleet. Outside, other human-made spacecraft began to drift in space. No energy. No movement. Completely vulnerable. Then it happened. One of the gigantic black ships moved slowly. Without making a sound, without activating the engines. She simply glided through space toward the human fleet. And as it drew closer, the surrounding stars began to disappear, as if reality itself were being swallowed up. A primal fear gripped the crew. It wasn't just fear of dying. It was something worse. Something that no human being should ever have to feel. As if their instincts were screaming that those creatures didn't belong in the universe. Elias immediately realized that this was no ordinary invasion. It was something much bigger, much older. Then a transmission appeared on all the screens of the spacecraft, but it didn't seem like normal communication. There was no image. There was no voice. Just a strange noise, deep, almost impossible to hear without feeling pain. The soldiers began to cover their ears. Some fell to their knees. Others were bleeding from the nose. Then the sound stopped, and a single sentence appeared on Vokrion's monitors. Localized timeline. The silence that followed was even worse. Elias felt his heart race, because at that moment he realized something terrifying. Those creatures weren't looking for planets. Not even resources, not even territories. They were looking for people. Behind him, little Ethel watched the screens in utter terror. Tears streamed silently down her face. Then she uttered the phrase that made everyone's blood run cold. They came to erase this reality. The silence that followed that sentence was unbearable. No one on the bridge was able to react. The girl's words echoed in everyone's mind like a death sentence. They came to erase this reality. Elias looked again at the enormous black ships outside the Vokrion. The more he observed those structures, the more he felt a strange sensation growing inside his chest. It was as if his mind was telling him to run away. As if every human instinct was screaming that this was not something that could be confronted. Then the first human spacecraft disappeared. No explosion. Without warning. Leaving no wreckage. An entire cruiser simply vanished before the fleet's eyes. In a second he was there. And the other one. It no longer existed. The soldiers stood motionless in shock. What happened to them? Someone asked, their voice trembling. No one answered. Because nobody knew. Another spacecraft disappeared. Then another one. And another one. As if invisible hands were erasing pieces of the universe. Panic ensued immediately. We need to get out of here. Engines are still offline. We were unable to activate the systems. Soldiers screamed desperately from the bridge while operators tried in vain to regain control of the craft. But Elias couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Ethel, she seemed to sense everything before it happened. Every disappearance, every mistake, every second. Then he realized something even worse. She was getting weaker. His body was trembling violently now. Tiny, luminous marks appeared on his skin like cracks gleaming beneath the flesh. Elijah approached. What's happening to you? The girl slowly raised her silvery eyes. For the first time, Elias saw pure despair in them. They are entering this timeline. Before he could ask what that meant, everything stopped. Literally, the alarms have fallen silent. The soldiers froze in place. The lights stopped flickering. Even the smoke in the air stood still. Time had stopped. Elias's eyes widened. His heart raced instantly. He looked around, unable to understand. A soldier remained frozen in the middle of a scream. Another one was motionless, falling to the ground. Outside the spacecraft, entire explosions had stopped in space like frozen images. The entire universe looked like a photograph, except for two people. And the girl. Elias slowly retreated. What did you do? The girl was breathing with difficulty. He seemed to be using all his strength just to remain conscious. It wasn't me. His voice came out weak. Almost breaking. They are disrupting the flow of time. Elias tried to understand those words, but his mind seemed incapable of processing what was happening. That defied all logic. Complete reality. The girl suddenly grabbed his hand. The instant he touched it, images flooded his mind. Thousands of them. Planets burning, galaxies destroyed, entire civilizations disappearing into the void, humans running desperately as the sky itself seemed to crumble above them. And in the midst of all that, the same black spaceships. Always present, always moving forward, like predators traversing time. Elias fell to his knees, struggling to breathe. The images looked too real. He could hear the screams, feeling the heat of the explosions. To feel millions of lives disappearing. Then he saw something worse. He saw the Earth, completely destroyed. Without oceans. Without cities. Lifeless. Just ruins under a black sky. And at the center of that vision, he himself was there. Alone. Watching the end of everything. The images disappeared abruptly. Elias began breathing heavily again on the bridge floor. Sweat was running down his face. Her heart felt like it was about to explode. The girl could barely stand now. I tried to stop it, she whispered. But it's already started. So slowly, time has turned back. The alarms went off again. The soldiers resumed their movements without realizing they had been frozen. The explosions continued outside. As if nothing had happened. But Elijah knew. That was real. And for the first time in many years, the commander of the Earth fleet felt genuine fear. Changed everything within Val Kryon. Up until that moment, the soldiers believed they were facing just another battle in the war. Another desperate mission against unknown forces. But now, nobody knew what was real anymore. Elias was still trying to catch his breath after the visions the girl had shown him. His heart was racing, and his mind seemed trapped between logic and terror. He had seen the end of the Earth, not as a possibility, but as something inevitable. The bridge remained in utter chaos. Operators screamed, trying to restore systems, while dozens of human ships silently disappeared outside. No explosions. No fighting. Simply erased from existence. It was worse than death. Much worse. The girl, Ethel, remained kneeling near the main panel. Her body seemed increasingly unstable. The bright marks scattered across her skin pulsed slowly, as if something inside her was breaking. Even so, she still looked at those black ships with a fear far greater than any human there felt. Elias realized this immediately. She wasn't afraid of war. I was afraid of them. The commander walked slowly towards her. Who are these creatures? The girl took a few seconds to answer. As if just remembering that name was painful. Then he spoke almost in a whisper. The time eaters. Silence fell once more over the bridge. Even the most desperate soldiers stopped to listen, because that phrase carried something dark about it, something old. Elias kept his eyes fixed on her. What do they want? The girl slowly raised her gaze. And for the first time, there were real tears streaming down her face. They don't conquer worlds. They don't form alliances. They don't enslave civilizations. She took a deep breath. They erase entire realities. The words crossed the bridge like ice. One of the officers laughed nervously. That's impossible. The girl slowly turned her face towards him. You just saw it happen. The officer immediately fell. Silent, because she was right. Everyone watched the ships disappear. Everyone felt time stand still. There was no denying it anymore. Elias tried to remain calm. Who are they really? The girl took a while to answer. He seemed to be searching for strength. Then he finally revealed. They existed before the first civilizations were born, before the empires. Even before the wars, the soldiers listened in absolute silence. The devourers travel through time searching for species that could threaten their existence in the future. And when they find one, she looked at the screens showing the human systems disappearing. They erase everything before it can evolve. Elijah's blood ran cold. Are you saying that they exterminate entire civilizations before they become dangerous? The girl nodded slowly. They don't fight against enemies. They prevent enemies from existing. Those words completely destroyed everything Elias believed in, because that meant one thing: humanity never had a chance. The war against the atheist, the battles, the deaths. Everything else was insignificant compared to what was happening now. Then Elijah asked the most important question of all. What does this have to do with the Ethel? The girl closed her eyes for a few seconds. As if that truth were too heavy a burden. Then he replied, my people didn't start the war because they hated humans. She opened her eyes again. We were trying to prepare you. The soldiers reacted immediately. That's a lie. They destroyed human planets. They massacred millions. The girl screamed for the first time, to try and save the future. Silence returned instantly. Her voice trembled with pain. Every attack, every battle, every territory destroyed. She took a deep breath. They were desperate attempts to alter the course of time. Elias felt his mind spinning. Then everything started to make sense. The Ethel never occupied planets. They never tried to dominate the galaxy. They never sought political power. They attacked specific places, specific events. As if they were trying to prevent something bigger. The girl looked directly at Elias. In all timelines where humans and Ethel remain at war. She pointed to the black ships. They win. At that moment, Elias realized something terrifying. The entire galaxy had been manipulated by fear, while humans and Ethel were destroying each other. The real monsters were approaching silently. Waiting for the right moment to delete everything. For years, humanity believed it knew its enemies. The Ethel were treated as monsters throughout the galaxy. Their faces appeared in military propaganda. Children grew up hearing stories about cities destroyed by them. Soldiers swore revenge even before entering battle. Hatred had become part of human culture. Elias believed that too. In truth, no one hated the Ethel more than he did. Each scar on his body carried memories of the war. Each battle further reinforced the idea that this race needed to be exterminated. But now, everything was starting to fall apart. The Valkyrian bridge remained shrouded in tension, as the enormous black ships stood motionless outside. They seemed to be waiting. Observing. Like predators, circling wounded prey. The ship's systems were still constantly malfunctioning. Lights flickered. Interference covered the monitors. But nobody paid any attention anymore. Everyone was looking at the girl, Ethel, waiting for answers, hoping she would say that was a lie. But she only remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said, you never understood war. The words struck Elias like a blade. My people tried to warn you. One of the officers replied immediately. Warn us? You destroyed entire colonies. The girl lowered her eyes. There was guilt in his face, a deep guilt. Try. She breathed slowly before continuing. Because some colonies were already doomed. The silence grew even heavier. What does that mean? Elias asked. The girl raised her silver eyes again. The devourers leave marks on time, certain places, certain people, certain events. She pointed to the malfunctioning holograms around the bridge. When we realized that a timeline was beginning to lead to the end of the galaxy, we tried to interrupt it. Elias felt a shiver run through his body. You sacrificed entire planets to alter the future? The girl did not answer immediately. Because the answer was obvious. Tried. That completely shattered any certainty that existed on the bridge. The soldiers began exchanging confused glances because, for the first time, the Ethel attacks were starting to make sense. They never invaded random territories. They never attacked for resources. They always appeared in specific locations, specific events, specific people. As if they were trying to stop something invisible. Then Elias remembered Marcus. Your brother, the last message. They are not what we think. His heart immediately tightened. What if Marcus had discovered the truth before he disappeared? What if all of that was real from the beginning? The girl continued, in thousands of possible futures. We've seen the same thing happen. She pointed to the black ships. They always arrived. The bridge lights flickered violently again. Outside, 2 more human-made craft disappeared without a trace. Some soldiers looked away, unable to watch. The girl took a deep breath. We've tried to change the future countless times. We create wars. We destroyed alliances. We have changed important events. She slowly closed her eyes, but we were never able to completely stop what was coming. Elias walked slowly to the enormous window in the bridge. The black ships seemed even bigger now, almost infinite. Then he asked the question that no one else had the courage to ask. If the Ethel can see the future. His voice came out low. Heavy. So why did you still lose? The girl took a while to answer, and when she answered, her voice was filled with pure, worthy despair, because there is something worse than seeing the future. She looked directly at Elijah to discover that in all of them, you die. The silence that followed was devastating. Some soldiers slowly lowered their weapons. Others simply couldn't speak anymore. The entire war, all the deaths, all the pain. Perhaps it was built on a gigantic lie. While humans fought against the Ethel, believing they were protecting the galaxy, the real enemies advanced, hidden beyond time. And now, perhaps it's already too late to stop. For the first time in many years, Elias Kane didn't know what to do. The war had destroyed everything he believed in. Now, faced with those black ships and the revelations of the girl Ethel, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. The Valkyrian bridge remained shrouded in silence as the space around the human fleet slowly vanished. Entire systems ceased to exist before the crew's eyes. No explosions. No battles. It's as if the universe is being erased piece by piece. The soldiers no longer looked like warriors. They seemed like survivors, waiting for the end. And in the center of that chaos was the girl. Fragile. Scared. But carrying answers that could decide the fate of the galaxy. She remained kneeling near the deactivated holograms of the ship. Her body was becoming increasingly unstable now. The glowing marks scattered across her skin pulsed erratically, like cracks slowly forming. Elias realized she was dying. Even so, he kept trying to help them. The commander walked slowly towards her. Who are you, really? The girl remained silent for a few seconds. Then he replied, my name is Lyra. It was the first time she had said her name, and for some reason, that made everything even more real. She was not just an AETHL. It was a child trapped in the middle of the end of the universe. Elijah knelt before her. Why did you come to me? Lyra slowly raised her silvery eyes, and then she said something that made his blood run cold. Because you're the last hope. The soldiers immediately exchanged glances. Elias frowned. That doesn't make sense. I'm just a commander. I have no power to stop this. Lyra shook her head slowly. You don't understand. She lightly touched his arm. At that very moment, small images began to appear in Elias's mind again. Quick fragments, future wars, planets destroyed, fleets colliding in space. Black ships advancing through entire galaxies. And in all those visions, he would show up. Always alive. Always present in the final moments. Elias pulled his arm away immediately, startled. What is that? Lyra was breathing with difficulty now. I can see fragments of the timelines. She pointed at him, and in all of them. You're there, silence fell over the bridge once more. Elias felt an overwhelming weight on his chest. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. Lyra lowered her gaze. I wish there was. The lights on the Valkyrion flickered violently again. This time, the entire spacecraft shook. An operator shouted in despair. One of the black ships is approaching. Everyone immediately looked at the main monitors. The gigantic dark structure slowly advanced towards the human fleet. No rush. As if he knew that no one could escape. And as she approached, the surrounding space began to distort. The stars were disappearing. Reality itself seemed to be breaking down. The soldiers began to panic again. They will destroy us. We have no weapons. We couldn't escape. But Lyra seemed even more terrified than all of them. She gripped Elias's arm tightly. They know. Elias looked at her. Do you know what? Tears streamed down the girl's face. That you were still alive. His heart raced. Like this? Lyra trembled as she spoke. In every timeline, there comes a point when the devourers fail. She took a deep breath. And this moment always involves you. The entire bridge fell into absolute silence. Even the alarms seemed distant now. Elias tried to process those words. That didn't make sense. He was just a soldier, a man broken by war. Nothing more. But then Lyra said something worse. Something that destroyed any remaining hope. That's why they started erasing this reality ahead of time. Elias felt his blood run cold. They're trying to kill me. Lyra slowly confirmed it. Before you figure out how to defeat them. Outside the Valkyrion, the gigantic black ship finally stopped before the human fleet, and at that moment, all of the ship's systems shut down completely. The lights went out. The monitors died. Absolute silence filled the space. Elias realized something terrifying. The real war was only just beginning, and he was her primary target. Darkness has engulfed Valkryon. No lights. No alarms. No systems working. For the first time since the beginning of the war, the silence seemed more terrifying than any explosion. The gigantic black ship stood motionless before the human fleet like an entity, observing defenseless prey. Its colossal structure obscured the surrounding stars, plunging parts of space into deep shadows. Inside the bridge, nobody moved. The soldiers were breathing slowly. Some were trembling. Others simply stared into the void, trying to come to terms with what they were seeing, because everyone had understood one thing. That wasn't an invasion. It was an execution. Elias remained motionless near the main window of the ship. The dark reflection in the glass showed his tired face, marked by years of war. But now there was something different in his eyes. Fear. Not afraid to die. He had accepted his own death a long time ago. What frightened him was something else. The possibility that the entire galaxy was truly doomed. Behind him, Lyra struggled to remain conscious. Her breathing was weak, and the glowing marks scattered across her body grew slowly like cracks in her energy. Even so, she still looked at Elijah. As if he believed him. As if he could actually change the fate of the universe. Then it happened. The black ship began to emit a deep sound. It didn't look like a machine. It looked like something alive. The sound pierced the space and echoed within the minds of the entire crew. Some soldiers immediately fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Others began to bleed from the nose. Elias felt an absurd pressure inside his skull. Then images appeared before him. Thousands of them. Civilizations disappearing. Entire suns being extinguished. Galaxies collapsing into the void. And at the center of it all, the creatures behind the black ships. Finally, Elijah saw them. They were enormous. Too tall to be human. Their bodies seemed to be made of liquid shadow, constantly shifting shape. They had no defined faces, only white eyes gleaming in the absolute darkness. The time eaters. Elias felt a terror that was impossible to explain, because just looking at those creatures made her mind seem to slowly break down. Then a voice invaded his thoughts. It wasn't a normal voice. It was cold. Old. As if it came from something that existed before life itself. You shouldn't exist. Elijah immediately fell to his knees. The pressure in his mind was increasing more and more. The voice continued. This timeline is doomed. Your future needs to be erased. The soldiers around them began to faint one by one. Some were shouting, others simply stopped moving. Lyra gathered her strength and ran to Elias. Don't listen to them. She cupped his face in her hands the instant he touched it. Everything changed. Elijah saw a new vision, but this time it was different. He saw humans and Ethel fighting side by side. He saw entire fleets united against the Devourers. He saw planets surviving. He saw hope. And then he realized the Devourers were not invincible. They were afraid of something, fear of a specific future, a future where the galaxy species set aside war and united. The vision disappeared. Elias returned to the bridge, breathing heavily. The voice of the Devourers echoed once more inside the ship. Resistance is futile, but now something had changed inside him. For years, Elias fought, driven by hatred, for revenge, through pain. But at that moment, he finally understood. The war against the Aether was never the real conflict. The real war was beginning now. A war for the future of existence. The commander slowly rose from the ground. The surviving soldiers looked at him. Lyra too. Elias stared at the gigantic black ship before the Vacreon. Then he spoke for the first time without fear. If they want to erase our future, he clenched his fists. So let's fight for the right to exist. Outside, the stars began to disappear again. The black ships advanced, and at that moment, the real galactic war has begun.